Just an hour before dawn, the silence was shattered. Russian missiles illuminated the Ukrainian skies. Their initial targets were military sites in locations that have now become all too familiar: Odessa, Mariupol, Kharkiv, and Kyiv. The world's first reaction? Shock. A full-scale war? It seemed unthinkable. But for Vladimir Putin, the decision wasn't surprising. He believed he had no other choice but to invade. "I have made the decision for a military operation. Anyone who interferes or threatens Russia will face an immediate response," Putin declared. He labeled it a special military operation, a term that many initially mocked. But now, after witnessing the war in Gaza, some might see his reasoning differently. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for real-time updates, expert political insights, and deep dives into the critical issues shaping Russia and Ukraine's future. Hit that subscribe button now and stay informed. Now let's get into it. Putin outlined three main objectives: denazification, demilitarization, and ensuring Ukraine's neutral status. His stance was clear: Russia would never tolerate a NATO-aligned Ukraine. The first days saw Russian forces advancing rapidly, reaching the outskirts of Kyiv. Many questioned where the Ukrainian leadership had gone, until Volodymyr Zelensky appeared in a now iconic selfie video from the streets of the capital. It was the first of many. Ditching his formal attire for military fatigues, Zelensky sent an unmistakable message. He was ready to fight, not negotiate. The sentiment in Europe and North America mirrored his resolve. To Western leaders, this was a defining moment, an opportunity to stand with Ukraine. "Ukraine will never be a victory for Putin. He might seize a city, but he'll never hold the country," declared the US president, as NATO threw its full support behind Kyiv. The West believed sanctions would cripple Russia, military aid would turn the tide, and global pressure would isolate Putin. But none of that happened. Instead, Ukraine now faces the real possibility of defeat. So how did Putin manage to defy the odds? And was he right all along? Western strategy rested on three ambitious assumptions. 1. Russia's economy would collapse. 2. NATO's military aid would be enough to stop Russia. And 3. Putin would be diplomatically isolated. Yet the reality played out differently. Russia's economy outpaced the G7 in growth, projected at 4% compared to their 1.7%. The ruble, which was predicted to crumble, remained largely stable. When the war began, $1 was 85 rubles. Today, it's about 88, far from the economic ruin many expected. On the battlefield, early predictions of a swift Russian collapse never materialized. While the initial strategy suggested a blitzkrieg, the war has stretched into a grinding battle of attrition. Yet, Russia now controls nearly 20% of Ukraine. As for diplomatic isolation, the pictures tell a different story. Since the war began, Putin has strengthened alliances rather than lost them. He's hosted African leaders in Moscow, deepened ties with China's Xi Jinping, forged new partnerships with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, and maintained strong relations with India despite Western pressure. If this is isolation, it's a version many leaders would welcome. So, what did Putin do right? Three key things. He ensured Ukraine and the West had no path to military victory. From the start, Russia set clear red lines. Whenever tensions escalated, Putin raised the specter of nuclear conflict, holding drills, placing deterrents on high alert. This tactic worked. Western leaders hesitated to supply Ukraine with long-range weapons, urging Kyiv to defend rather than attack. By then, Russia had gained the upper hand. He safeguarded Russia's economy. Despite being hit with over 24,000 sanctions, Russia remained resilient. When the West cut ties, Putin pivoted eastward, selling oil to India and China, bolstering arms sales, and keeping revenue streams alive. He also expanded BRICS, which grew from a 5-nation bloc into a 10-member alliance, now working to challenge Western economic dominance. He framed this war strategically, not ideologically. Putin never positioned this as a battle of good versus evil. Instead, he framed it as a negotiation over Russia's security interests. His message remained consistent. Russia had demands and was open to talks, but only on its terms. And that is exactly what we are seeing unfold today. The West outright dismissed the idea of diplomacy with Vladimir Putin. But Putin? He never fully shut that door. He kept it slightly ajar, almost as if he was waiting for the right player to step in. And that player turned out to be Donald Trump. President Putin and President Zelensky will have to come to the table, because at the end of the day we need to stop the killing of millions of people, Trump declared. In essence, Putin played the long game. He never rushed to capture Kyiv or plant the Russian flag there. In fact, one has to wonder, was his goal ever to occupy the entire country? Or was it always about breaking Ukraine apart? Instead of making hasty moves, Putin waited. He watched as global energy prices soared, food and fertilizer supply dwindled, inflation spiraled, and political instability mounted in the West. Western leaders struggle with plummeting approval ratings, the far-right surge across Europe, and finally, it was a masterclass in strategic patience. But at its core, it came down to one fundamental question: who wanted it more? Did Putin want a neutral Ukraine more than the West wanted a NATO-aligned Ukraine? He wagered that the answer was yes. And 3 years later, it seems like that gamble has paid off. The war isn't over yet, but Putin appears to be having the last laugh. And he's not out of moves, he has options. He could push Trump for more concessions, he could prolong negotiations while gaining more ground on the battlefield, or he could take an even bigger gamble.
The savage conflict in Ukraine, millions of Ukrainians and Russians have been needlessly killed or wounded in this horrific and brutal conflict with no end in sight. The United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense, with no security, with no anything.
Trump has already shown his hand. He wants to end this war quickly. But if a deal can't be reached, what happens next? Will Trump cut off military aid to Ukraine regardless? If he does, Putin could achieve a decisive victory on the battlefield. That's not a certainty, but it's an option. And then there's the broader geopolitical shift. For decades, Europe relied on the United States for security. Now, Trump is dismantling that safety net, urging Europe to take charge of its own defense. In America, this resonates. A nation with deep-rooted isolationist tendencies. The result? A weaker NATO. A weaker NATO means fragile transatlantic ties. And weak transatlantic ties? That plays right into Putin's hands. It gives him more room to assert Russian influence with fewer checks on his ambitions. So at this moment, the outlook is favorable. Everything seems to be falling into place for Putin. But before jumping to conclusions, let's consider a few key points. First, Putin had the luxury of strategic patience. Unlike Western leaders, he doesn't face elections, public backlash, or the risk of being voted out. That gives him the ability to wait out tough times, a privilege democratic leaders don't have. His strategy may have been effective, but that doesn't make his actions justified. Russia's invasion of Ukraine remains a violation of sovereignty. Ukraine, like any nation, has the right to make its own decisions. While Zelensky took a hard stance, war should never have been the answer. Putin's focus on Ukraine came at a cost. His longtime ally, Bashar al-Assad, lost power in Syria, largely due to Russia's lack of military support. NATO has expanded. Finland and Sweden, both historically neutral, have now joined the alliance. This highlights a fundamental truth in geopolitics. No victory is absolute and no loss is total defeat. Success lies in maximizing gains while minimizing setbacks. We want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on Putin winning the ongoing war? Do you believe he still has a path to victory, or is his influence waning? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe for the latest updates, expert analyses, and deep political insights. Stay ahead of the news and join the discussion. Hit that subscribe button now